there we go. We don't want to lose any of this critical information. So yeah, name and email address in the chat. And our agenda for tonight, we've got a nice lineup of plover enthusiasts and biologists and ecologists and all the people who are involved with protecting these birds here in the Monterey Bay area. So we're going to start off with what I dubbed Confessions of a Plover Lover, but Yvonne Wright, one of our stellar 2022 Plover Guardian volunteers, is going to start us out with some pictures and stories of what she's seen and kind of what got her hooked. Then we'll move on to some Snowy Plover Natural History with George Cummins from Point Blue Conservation Science. They're one of the main groups that actually, research and study and monitor the plovers in Monterey Bay. Then we'll hand it over to Amy Palkovic. She's with the Monterey District State Park. She's an environmental scientist who is like the land manager for most of the sandy beaches where these plovers live. I'll do a little bit. My name is Amanda Priest. I'm with the Monterey Audubon Society. I'll do a little bit about public outreach and interpretation. And then we'll wrap up with Sam Winter once again, doing some logistics and paperwork sort of stuff. So those of you who want to move on and become a guardian, take it to the next level, can get started with that. But without much further ado, I'm going to see if Yvonne wants to, I'm going to stop sharing my screen, and Yvonne, if you want to give it a go and share your screen and share your story with us. I can't wait to hear it.
Oh yeah, thank you, Amanda. I'm just going to start by talking a little bit about how I got involved working as a volunteer to help snowy plovers here in Monterey Bay. So it started actually almost 3 years ago now. If everybody can hear me okay. Yeah. So I was at Carmel River State Beach, and I saw my first banded snowy plover, and it was a little snowy plover that had a silver band on the left leg and a green one on the right. And I got very curious, and at the time I asked one of the volunteer coordinators at the aquarium who referred me to Chris Newman. And, for those of you that don't know Chris, she's the principal ecologist for Point Blue. And Chris later invited me to see if I would be interested in helping out with a winter monitoring of the birds. And so I was part of a group of volunteers that was trained by Carlton Eister, who's one of the long-term biologists for Monterey Bay until I think just recently last year. And that experience really it just made me realize how much the plovers still need our help. And so last year when the Plover Guardian program was restarted, I jumped at the opportunity to be a Plover Guardian. And I really wish we didn't need Plover Guardians, but as you'll hear more about the many challenges from our speakers tonight, they very much still need our help. And I happen to enjoy taking photos. And as you can imagine, the plovers became one of my favorite subjects. So I put together a little slideshow of photos that I've taken in the last couple of years. And I hope they show not only how adorable they are, but also how vulnerable they can be. And I hope it inspires you to join the team. So I'm going to share my screen. I think is just press the share screen. Amanda, is that how I do?
Yeah, the share screen option at the bottom, hopefully it's green and you can click on it and then choose which window you want to share, or you want to do your whole desktop, whatever you like.
I think this is it right
there
here.
There it is. Yep, very good. Thank you.
All right. And then I think full screen and how this works. Can everybody see my screen?
Yep, that looks perfect.
Okay, here we go. Short slideshow. That's it. Thank you, guys.
That was wonderful. Oh my gosh, I didn't realize they were going to be such amazing pictures. Those were so good. Um, the plovers in flight with the sanderling mixed in was really awesome. Those are two birds that people sometimes misidentify in the winter when the sanderlings are here, but it's cool to see them like side by side. That's good for like identification, but beautiful also, all in focus. I still have never accomplished that with my pictures. Well, super. Yeah. So thanks so much for sharing, Yvonne. That was pretty inspiring and really great pictures. So our next speaker is going to be George from Point Blue. Hi there, George. George is a coastal ecologist with Point Blue Conservation Science, and they've been heavily involved in monitoring and banding, like Yvonne got to see the plovers with the little ankle bands. Well, those aren't their ankles, but they're hawks, I guess.
Yep.
All those that you see around on the bay. George is heavily involved with that. So we'll pass it over to him to do a little bit of plover natural history.
Yeah, thanks. And I'll just try to get my screen shared.
Yep, looks good.
So that look good. Cool. Yeah, so my name's George Cummins. I work for Point Blue, and I live in Santa Cruz actually, but work throughout the Monterey Bay on the Snowy Plover project. So I was just gonna talk for 15 or 20 minutes or so about the ecology and kind of wrap in some population status of the snowy plovers here in the Monterey Bay. So I don't know, the level of knowledge of snowy plovers amongst everybody on the call. So I figured I would start relatively broad. Snowy plovers, the scientific name is Charadrius nivosus, and we have here in California on the coast, the western snowy plover subspecies, which is listed as endangered. So you can see on this range map here, everything in green is actually year-round range for these birds. So you can see in California, we have snowy plovers all year on our beaches, and they breed here, they winter here, and they really stick to the sandy beaches, right? So there's a lot of rocky coastline in the state, but the snowy plovers are really specialists on those sandy beaches like we have a lot of in Monterey Bay. And they're really well adapted to that, right? You can see in these pictures here, their eggs are pretty camouflaged, their chicks, the adults, they're all actually kind of hard to see when they're out there on the beach. So why reason is we do have some good habitat here, but also, even though occasionally we get long dispersal, and by dispersal I mean birds moving from one place to live in a whole different area, even though we have a few birds that were born in, say, Oregon that breed here, the majority of the birds here, and snowy plovers in general, disperse maybe at most sort of 5 or 6 miles from where they were born. So the birds here in Monterey Bay are the most important birds to sustaining this population, and that holds true across their whole range. So it's important to keep a lot of plovers in those places where we have a lot, because they don't move too terribly far to live in different areas. Like I said, they really like those nice sandy beaches to live on. So this is an aerial view of Moss Landing State Beach here in Monterey, and the inset is the photo I took from monitoring the plovers on this beach. And you can see here in the inset picture, the green kind of area of vegetation and this gentle foredune. They use that habitat a lot for nesting, and then they use the more open beach where the rack is to forage. So what do these birds eat? They are a visual predator. So we've already mentioned sanderlings on the call. You may have seen other shorebirds running around right at the water's edge, and they're often sticking their beak and their face right down in the sand. Those birds are feeding largely by feel. So they're using their beak to try to feel invertebrates. Snowy plovers, on the other hand, use their eyes. So they run and dart and stop and look and then run somewhere else to go grab their food. And what they prey on is what we call epifauna, which is stuff like these amphipods here or kelp flies. And these are invertebrates that actually decompose the kelp. So the kelp that's washing up on the beach then gets decomposed by various little organisms, and that's what these snowy plovers are feeding on. So they really need a nice healthy kelp forest off the coast so that it can wash up and provide them food on the sandy beaches. So how are they doing in the Monterey Bay? So this figure shows the Monterey Bay snowy plover population from 85, which is around when we started heavily monitoring them here, up through last year. So you can see it goes through time on the x-axis, and then the individual bars represent the number of breeding adults. So this is during the breeding season, how many birds are here across the whole Monterey Bay. And you can see that that number was relatively low to start out with. This subspecies then was listed as endangered, and a lot more management actions were taken. And then the population started increasing. And the population target as set by Fish and Wildlife Service for our kind of area in the Monterey Bay is 338 birds during the breeding season. And so you can see these bars often exceeded that for many years. So we were doing quite well. But then starting around 2016 or so, the population started to decline during the breeding season. Until recently, it's spent several years below that target number. So we're really trying to figure out how to boost their population back up to that recovery target goal. The good thing is you can see in 2022, it was just below that gray line, and it's been trending up for the past few years. So it's to be seen what 2023 will hold, but hopefully we'll once again see that population heading upward. So why might these birds, or what threats are they facing? What's causing their population decline? I'll just list a few here, and I won't go into too much detail, but yeah, I'll briefly touch on it. So predators are one thing, and that's largely, we think, related to the breeding season as opposed to adult birds, although of course predators will take an adult bird. But largely the predators that we see are either introduced or subsidized. And so introduced predators, maybe like red foxes that didn't used to be here. And then subsidized predators are things like corvids or skunks, things that are heavily using our beaches now, but that's a recent thing. And they're largely there because of some kind of human development or easy human provided food that's nearby that enables them to kind of move in the area. And while they're there, they may as well eat some plover eggs while they're hanging out. Human disturbance is another kind of cause of decline, and that's everything from just heavily used beaches kind of pushing the plovers to a different area to actually, trampling nests and things like that. And landscape change is maybe the more obvious one, just simply habitat conversion, more development along the coast and things like that have limited the beaches where these birds can persist. So in terms of their lifespan and survival, we've done studies here in the Monterey Bay and found that male and females, adults, survival is roughly around 70%. So about 70% chance that they survive from 1 year to the next once they're an adult. But as is the case with most wildlife and most birds, that first year of life is the hardest and kind of has a wide range. So we've seen everywhere from 28% up to 57% survival in that first year. But once they make it past that first year, they can live quite a long time. So the average lifespan is 4 years, but they can live up to 18 years. We had this one male that we banded as a chick here at Sunset State Beach in 2003 and last saw in 2021, and he bred almost every year in that span. So that was almost an 18, or was an 18-year-old bird right here. I think the record is up, the known record of banded birds anyway, I think is 20 years old up in Humboldt County. And then actually I'll say also the oldest bird that I know of currently on Monterey Bay is 14 and a half and was seen this past winter. So hopefully he made it through the storms last month or two and will be a 15-year-old bird, which is pretty good for a small plover. In terms of success, we usually kind of think of that in terms of what they're sort of contributing to the population. And so by that, I mean, how many offspring are they successfully raising every year? And our kind of current record is this male that was banded white, blue, blue, red, and fledged 39 young over at least 13 years. We banded him as an adult, so he could have had even more than that. So that's pretty impressive. Now, the breeding season in general starts across the range in March, we say. Kind of March 1st is the official date, but the exception to that seems to consistently be four-door dunes here in Monterey. And seems like every year there's a pair that will breed early. I think our only three initiation dates of nests, so the first egg laid of the year that were in February were all in four-door dunes. And in particular, there's one pair that Amy on this call knows quite well, I think, that set our record last year at February 19th is when, so it's very possible there's already eggs out there, or there could be anyway. And this pair has been breeding there for a while, and I think they have like half of our earliest 15 nests or something like that. So they're just, they like to get after it really early. But their breeding season is quite long. So the last chicks don't fledge until September, which means here in Monterey and really across their range, from March into September, you have very vulnerable chicks and eggs on the beaches here. So a little bit about their kind of breeding life cycle. Both parents incubate, the males and females. Generally the males at night and females during the day, but they can switch at other times. They lay 3 eggs almost always. And they usually, you know, we think of them as putting their nest nicely behind the fenced off or kind of roped off areas on the beach. But I wanted to show this picture. If you haven't seen the nest, it's down here in the lower left. This is well outside of that roped area, and you can see the footprints are not ours. We found the nest with these footprints walking right by it, presumably to go read this nice plover sign here, but almost stepped on the nest on their way to go see it. So just a note, when you're out there on the beach, just because an area has a rope does not mean the plovers are only behind it. They will use the entire beach. And we saw lots of nesting on the open beach during 2020 when the beaches were closed. But not only are eggs hard to see on the open beach, also adults are. So you may be able to easily see how many birds are in this picture. But again, just to note that they're going to be out there on the open beach. They're not just behind that roped off area. So we've got 3 birds here. 3 adult birds here in this picture outside of that roped area hanging out. Now, once they incubate for about a month, and then the eggs hatch, and they all hatch at the same time, so synchronous hatching. And the chicks are what we call precocial. That means that as soon as they hatch, they can run around within an hour or two, and they feed themselves. So unlike, you know, a baby robin or a house finch or something where the parents are feeding it, these babies immediately can feed themselves. They pretty much just need a little parent figure to tell them where to go. And I'll see if this video plays either with or without sound. But this is a hatching nest from a nest cam. So the adult's actually brooding a couple chicks right now. And you can see one of them just hatched. So he's trying to warm that one up, but they also clean up and they'll take those eggshells somewhere else. And in the meantime, you can see the two chicks that are already nice and fluffy are going to practice using their legs and flapping their wings, and just waiting for that third sibling of theirs to fluff up and get all warm from hatching out of the egg. And then within an hour or so, it'll be up and running as well. So the female, once she's done incubating, she actually leaves, and the male is the single parent in this species. So it's a little bit unique among birds. And like I said, the chicks can run around. And so while maybe most of them are hatched up in the foredune area where their nest was, the male has to lead them down to that rack line, right? That kelp that's decomposing so they can feed. So the male will take his chicks down the beach into that open area, and they'll be foraging and running around, and he's going to keep a lookout. And if he sees a predator coming, or people or a dog coming, then he is going to start making some noises and get all of his chicks to run back up towards the dunes, hopefully, so they can hide somewhere. You might also see or hear somebody talk about this kind of behavior. If you see a adult plover that's kind of flopping around on the beach, or dragging its tail across the sand, or its wings across the sand, that's actually not an injured bird. It's actually an anti-predator behavior. So a lot of shorebirds will do this, where they try to lure you away from their chicks. So I just thought I'd point this out. If you're out there on the beach and do see a plover that's acting like this, it probably means you should give it some space, because it's probably has young chicks very nearby, and it's trying to get you to follow it and leave. So the female, like I mentioned, will leave after the eggs have hatched, and she actually goes and finds a new mate. So they don't stay as a single pair throughout the breeding season. The female, once the eggs are hatched, she'll go find a new male, maybe a younger juvenile male who doesn't have a nest yet, and then she'll lay more eggs. Meanwhile, the male will raise the chicks, and once the chicks are grown up and fledged, then he'll go, and if there's enough time in the breeding season, he'll go and find another female and have a second nest himself. So they kind of switch like this throughout the breeding season. Just some notes on sort of how their nesting success was last year. We had well over 300 nesting attempts and almost 350 chicks that hatched, and 146 fledglings at least last year. And those numbers sound quite high, but remember, we're trying to sustain a pretty high population here in Monterey. And so we actually want that hatch rate to be a little higher than it was. So this graph shows through time on the x-axis, shows both the percentage of clutches that hatched and the percent of chicks that fledged. So that green line is that hatching line. This is just a general average since the year 2000. And you can see that it kind of has been trending downward, a little bit up the past couple of years, but overall it's a lot lower than it used to be. Largely, we think due to an increase in corvid predation on the nest. So we're really trying to kind of boost that hatch rate in hopes that once we do, we'll have more birds surviving and recruiting into the population. Because our fledge rate is actually about average through time. It hasn't changed a whole lot. So we're hoping if we get the hatch rate up, then that's going to increase the total number like you saw in that original figure I showed. And then a little bit about wintering birds. So after the breeding season's over, the fledglings have grown up and they start to form what we call wintering flocks. So during the breeding season, they might be dispersed and might be in certain areas and certain beaches. And then in the winter, they'll flock up and form larger groups that hang out together, and often in different areas than they were during the breeding season. So down there in Monterey, you might see birds in the winter at Carmel, and they don't really breed there though. So that's kind of a wintering area for them. Likewise, even within a stretch of beach, you might see them in different places. You might see up at Moss Landing, you may see more birds hanging out near the access points at Jetty Road and the flock during the winter than you would during the breeding season, for example. And then, even though they do live here year round, it's not always the same birds. So we get a lot of birds from other areas that come here to winter, but we also have birds that breed here and go somewhere else to winter. And then just to mix it up, we do have some birds that were born here, that breed here, and that winter here. So it's kind of all over the place with an individual, whether it's spends part of the year or what in a given area or a given beach within the bay. So yeah, I don't know if we're doing questions now or at the end, but yeah, happy to answer any that folks may have.
Awesome. Thanks so much, George. Yeah, I mean, we could take one or two questions. Not a ton, but I want to give you the option if you need to duck out if I end up talking really long in my stretch or something. But does anybody have any questions? You can either, use the little raise hand function, or you can unmute and ask your question. I'll give it a couple seconds because I've thought of a couple myself. Oh, here we go. In the chat room, Steele is asking, how do you read the bands?
Yeah, so I assume you mean in terms of how to record them. We generally read, left to right as if it was a book, if the bird's facing away from you. And then we read top to bottom, kind of like a book page. So in this picture here, that chick is already facing away. We're looking at its back. So its left leg is what we read first. So that would be red and what we call aqua color. So that bird is red, aqua, aqua, red. That makes sense.
Very cool. I've seen some people put those like in eBird if they see a bunch of snowy plovers at a beach. Does that make sense for us bird watchers to be doing that, or is it kind of like it's lost? I don't imagine you scour eBird records for plover bands. I don't even know how you'd access that. So is that something we should be reporting, or do we not worry about it because you guys are watching them?
Yeah, I would say in general, especially during the breeding season, we're out there all the time. So it's probably not a whole lot of new information to be concerned with. During the winter, we're not out there as much. And there might be large flocks of birds where you could, miss some that were banded even if you were there. So I'd say it's maybe more useful during the winter than during the breeding season, just right within the core areas within Monterey Bay. But any sightings are always welcome and always helpful. There's a Google group that you can submit them to. eBird, I usually go through and pull all the photos and just scan through really quick. And if I see any with bands, then I write it down. I've thought about going through and pulling comments out, but yeah, I haven't because it would just take a while.
Yeah, that'd be a lot of work. Similarly, Fred Brown in the chat's asking about what percentage of the birds are banded. Yeah,
that's a good question. So if you go back to like say the 90s during the breeding season, it would be almost all of them. But now the population is a lot larger and we're not out there 7 days a week trying to band every bird. So we actually are targeting to band 50% of the chicks that hatch. And so a smaller number than that fledge and a smaller number than that recruit into the population. We do band some adults, but I don't have an exact number of how many, but our kind of target is sort of roughly half of them.
Cool, that makes sense. Also, Jeff had a question about how the stronger storms might be affecting their habitat from this past winter.
Yeah, well, it definitely could be. Because it's just changed the beaches so much, right? Some areas that had a lot of sand had no sand or were wide open beaches and then were covered with tree trunks. And so I think they definitely will have had to move a lot, but it also has sort of improved habitat in other places. At the Salinas River Wildlife Refuge, there's already a decent amount of habitat, but the storms kind of blew out some of the dunes and made even more nice flat sandy habitat there than there used to be. So I think it kind of goes both ways.
Yeah, that makes sense. Do the plovers like the debris on the beach, like a little bunker to hide behind, or do you use it as like a little windbreak? Or it seemed like the nest was just in the open sand.
Yeah, they definitely do not mind being in the open sand. They might use some small amounts of vegetation, but they're not really going to be hiding necessarily behind like logs and things like that. And the other issue is if you have piles of debris, that is nice perches for raptors and other predators.
Totally. Yeah, no, that makes sense too. Awesome. Well, hey, I think we'll maybe stop there so we can go on to, although I did just see
Yeah.
Jeannie wrote in, are the plovers gone from Del Monte Beach? I do know, Jeannie, that there were a bunch of plovers seen at Seaside Beach just recently. So there's which is just a little ways, east of the Tides Hotel. So they're sneaking around, I think, out there on the beaches, and someone saw them at Carmel River. So they're just hard to spot. I think George had a good slide showing, and I've actually got one in my presentation too. Same concept. They're hard to spot. It's true.
Yeah.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, George. I don't know if you want to stick around to the end in case we have any other pressing natural history questions. That'd be super. But now we are lucky enough to have our California State Parks environmental scientist, Amy Palkovic, also here tonight. We just got a whole slew of amazing people here. So I'm going to turn it over to Amy to talk a little bit more about our local beaches that the plovers are at and some of the rules there and different land management kind of things that she's working on. So thanks, Amy.
Thank you. So I want to invite both Amanda and Sam to cut me off at any time. I'm going to try and I cut a bunch of stuff from last time, and I want to just make sure we stay on track here with time. So I'm going to try to share my screen. Let's see, this one. Nope, not that one. Damn it.
Oh, yep, looks good.
It does?
One.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Good. Okay. Thank you. Okay, so I'm Amy Palkovic, an environmental scientist with State Parks Monterey District. And I want to thank everybody who's joined us for your interest in our Guardian program, our Snowy Plover Guardian program. And I want to tell you what we think a Snowy Plover Guardian is. It's someone who can and will reach out to the public to inform them of park rules, provide interested individuals with information about the beach habitat and beach inhabitants, and the importance of following the rules to protect these things. It's not someone who will be monitoring or disturbing breeding plovers. It's important to us that we don't cause more harm with this program to our breeding birds out there. A typical shift for a guardian would be spent like at a beach access location, contacting people as they're exiting or entering the beach. It could also include going out onto the beach, but you want to be intercepting people as much as you can. So I think some of, let's see, how do I get my slide to go to the next slide? No, it's not working.
Spacebar maybe, or a right arrow?
Spacebar worked. Thank you. The right arrow did not work. Okay. So why do they need our help? The decline of the Pacific Coast population is primarily due to habitat loss and degradation that's caused by people. So we want to help fix this. So development reduces the amount of habitat available while simultaneously increasing the intensity of human use. Introduced invasive species like European beach grass and ice plant degrade beach habitat and foredune habitat. And human recreational use also degrades the beach habitat. And like George mentioned, plovers are on our beaches year round. We typically have higher numbers of plovers on our beaches during the winter months when they're found at the breeding sites as well as sites where they don't breed, including Carmel River State Beach. And they're actually most vulnerable during their breeding season. They're important year round, but very vulnerable during their breeding season. So the breeding season is quite long. It extends officially from March 1st through the end of September. And these are the 6 park units in our Monterey district on the Monterey Bay where the plovers are actually breeding. So that's, I guess you can see all the names there. I won't read them off to you. They also breed on the properties in between, but our Guardian program is focused on our properties here. And I want to cover some of these logistics before I run out of time. So we have identified stations at each of our park units where we think it would be helpful to perhaps have guardians available, but we know we have a limited number of actual people who are going to be doing this. So even though I'm going to show pictures of where people could go, we're not going to try to get all these sites. We're going to see how many people we get and then prioritize after that. So here on the left, you have Carmel River State Beach, and we have two stations identified there. And at Monterey State Beach, we have, I hope you can see, we have 3 stations identified there. And those are parking areas basically. And then at Fort Ordunes State Park, we have 2 stations there. And Marina State Beach, we have 2 stations. And like one of those stations there is, so the stations that are further from parking areas are generally less visited. So lower priority for contacting people just because there's less people, although sometimes there's more illegal activities at those places. So they are still important. So if we had an endless supply of snowy plover guardians, we would choose to man these stations as well. And then Salinas River State Beach has 3 parking lots, and so 3 stations there. And at Moss Landing State Beach up at Jetty Road, there's 4 beach access locations. So I envision that one or a pair of guardians could cover the whole site, basically the whole Moss Landing State Beach, kind of cover all those sites during one shift. And then Smedowski State Beach has 1 parking lot, and we have just 1 station identified there. Okay, and then this is just a list that is the same sites. It's 2 lists of the same sites. And on the left is the highlighted, what we would deem as higher priority areas during the breeding season. And then on the right side, we've highlighted areas that would be deemed higher priority during the non-breeding season when, so we have wintering flocks at Carmel River State Beach, but we don't have them breeding during the breeding season. So we don't need guardians out there during the breeding season, but we would love to have guardians out there when they're not breeding. So you don't have to memorize this, but this is just to kind of get the idea in all your heads that, you know, we have priority areas, and we hope to find people interested in some of these areas, and then we will prioritize and fit people where they want to go. So these are the primary rules to be aware of so that you can be prepared to contact park visitors. So no beach fires are allowed. People should never be entering closed areas. No dogs are allowed, except for leash dogs are actually allowed south of the Monterey Tides Hotel at Monterey State Beach. So actually hanging out at the north end of the hotel is a good place to contact dog owners that are traveling north on the beach into the area where no dogs are allowed. And then leash dogs are also allowed at Carmel River State Beach. Driftwood collecting is allowed, but the building of driftwood structures on the beach, which is kind of a common activity, that should be discouraged if you have the opportunity to do that. Horses are allowed at Salinas River State Beach, Moss Landing State Beach, and Smedowski State Beach. They're not allowed at any of our other beaches. And when they are on the beach, horses are restricted to the wet sand, so they should not be riding on the upper beach. That is something that we do sometimes find, but so I make contacts when I see that with the horseback riders to let them know that they should be staying on the low wet sand. So why are plovers more vulnerable during the breeding season? Stealth and camouflage are their primary defense against people and predators, which means people often don't notice them at all. Like George pointed out, they are hard to see. They lay their eggs on the open ground on the beach, which is where people like to recreate. Their nests take about 31 days to hatch, and they're hard to see, which makes them easy to trample. Plover chicks can't fly until they're around 28 days old, so running and hiding are their only escape routes during that period of time. Although they're flightless, they're highly mobile, and they use the entire beach profile, frequently feeding in the rack line. When a person or predator is nearby, chicks will flatten out on the ground and remain still to try to avoid detection. They're very well camouflaged and making them hard to see and easy to trample. And the breeding season includes all of the summer months, which is the most popular time for people to visit the beach. And these are the things that we do in the Monterey district to help the Western Snowy Plover. We install and remove miles of symbolic fencing each year to protect nesting areas by closing the upper beaches to public use. We partner with Point Blue Conservation Science and monitor the local plover population and track its breeding success. We conduct predator control in partnership with the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service. And that involves removing animals that we've identified through our monitoring as predators to breeding plovers. We enforce park rules and regulations that protect plovers, and we prohibit dogs from our North Beach units north of the Monterey Tides Hotel. So we also do trash management. We cover, contain, and remove trash from plover habitat and surrounding areas. We restore dune habitat to benefit plovers and other native species. We teach park visitors about snowy plovers, and we don't allow special events like weddings or film shoots or beach cleanup events during the breeding season on our beaches north of Monterey Tides Hotel in order to protect the plovers. So our seasonal symbolic fencing is intended to close the upper beach areas to park visitors, to protect nesting areas, and to give plover broods a place to take refuge away from people. So the plovers are not, George covered this already, but they're not always within the closed area. They're not always behind those fences. Flightless chicks are regularly found outside of fenced areas because they use the entire beach profile, and the rack line is a popular feeding location. And of course, adult plovers are outside of the fencing as well, and feeding and roosting and brooding their chicks outside of the fencing, sometimes inside of the fencing. And even nests are sometimes found outside of the fencing. And when that happens, we do try to move our fence or add to the fence to enclose those nests. But sometimes they're there before we know that they're there. So that is something that happens periodically and pretty regularly. But our goal is to have all nests behind the fences. But we always know that all birds are not behind the fences. So what is the impact of dogs and other illegal activities? The dogs can and will chase and kill plover chicks and can do so without their owners even noticing. They also can and do destroy nests. Even a well-behaved leashed dog is perceived as a predator by a snowy plover, and its presence on the beach will elicit a heightened response, causing plovers to flush from nests, flee an area, or perform lure displays. Trespass into closed nesting areas increases the likelihood of eggs being trampled and keeps plovers away from their nests. Repeated trespass will make an area unsuitable for nesting and brood rearing. And people camping in plover habitat will cause plovers to abandon nests and will make a site unsuitable for nesting and brood rearing. And campsites also will attract predators. Beach fires will keep plovers off of nearby nests, and they result in wood gathering from plover habitat, and the debris left behind will attract predators as well. Trash and food waste attract predators to plover habitat, increasing the risk of nests and chicks being taken by predators. And skunks, crows, and ravens, they're not the only predators that snowy plovers have, but they are all human subsidized predators that are attracted to our trash. So once we draw them into the habitat, we've invited them to prey upon our nests and chicks that are out there on the beach. And so that's why packing it out is very important. So going the extra mile for the Western Snowy Plover is something that I ask of my fellow park employees, and it's the goal of our Guardian program. When you see someone breaking the park rules, like someone with their dog on the beach, contact that person to inform them of the rules. Most people actually readily comply when they're contacted by a park employee or a volunteer, although some people aren't so happy to hear that they're breaking the rules. So I wanted to just briefly cover service animals, because that's kind of a, when dogs, I feel like dog contacts are a major contact for the Snowy Plover Guardian program. It's, I imagine the majority of the people that you find breaking the rules are going to be people with dogs on the beach. So it's important to know about service animals. Service dogs are allowed where other dogs are not. So you might be aware that some people like to pretend that their dog is a service dog. So here's some information to help guide your judgment. Like when you should call for a ranger. And of course, you can always choose to just assume these people are telling the truth and their dog is a service dog and just let it be. But if it seems blatantly not a service dog, there might be some steps you want to take. So service dogs are trained to perform tasks directly related to a person's disability. And here are some examples of the tasks that they may be trained to perform. Emotional support animals or companion animals are not service animals. If you have a reason to suspect that a dog is not a service dog, there are some things that we're not allowed to ask. And there's 2 questions that we are allowed to ask. So you never want to ask a person about their disability, and you don't want to ask for documentation or certification for the animal. And you, if it looks like it's clearly a service animal, then just don't ask anything at all. But what you can ask are these 2 questions. Is this dog required because of a disability? And what work or task has the dog been trained to perform? And I have asked that question many times, and often people blurt out their a disability. And I think that, it's never the question I've asked. And I kind of suspect that those are the people that are that are lying. Although I always do only ask people who I think are not honest about their service dog. So that was the gist of what I wanted to cover. And I wanted to provide my contact information here. And I also wanted to say that there are some things that we do want, there's data we do want our guardians to collect for us. Like how many dogs did you see and how many dog contacts did you make, or how many equestrians did you see? But unless Sam is going to cover that, which he might be covering that, I didn't check with him about it. If not, though, we would cover that over in the field training sessions, which I don't know that we've talked about yet, but I think Sam's going to talk about that. We do plan some field training sessions.
Yeah, well, I think we'll talk about the data at the field training sessions, but everyone should know that when you go in to log your volunteer hours is when you would also report that data. So best thing to do is to bring a notebook out into the field with you, and then record that. And then when you go back home and are logging your volunteer hours, then you can kind of submit that report at the same time. But
Great,
we'll talk
thank
all
you.
about that. Yeah.
Thank you, Sam. Okay, so how do I stop sharing?
I think somewhere near the top, there should be a little toolbar near the top of your screen with some options. Maybe a little tiny skinny toolbar that says stop sharing, maybe.
Okay, give me a second. Sorry about this. I'm not very good with.
No problem. It's okay.
If you have 2 monitors, sometimes it's like.
I do have 2.
Yeah, it's
Oh.
probably on the other one.
It's
You're
wherever
right.
you don't think it is.
Yeah, that's
It
what
is on the
happens
other
to
one.
me.
Thank
Thanks,
you.
George. Teamwork. That's wonderful.
Okay, so wait, what am I looking for? This is where
Stop share. Oh, you did it. Good job.
Thank you.
That's it.
Okay.
I got you.
Wonderful. Steele had a question in the chat about how long are the shifts, and I think we'll go over that a little bit more with Sam in the logistics section, but it's pretty flexible. It's going to be whatever time you have to allot in the field, essentially. But we'll go into that a little bit more, I think.
A short answer is most folks tend to go out for an hour to 3 hours. So it's sort of, we're trying to kind of get as much coverage as we can, but we also know it's a long time to be out on the beach. So no, there isn't really a strict shift requirement. But just so you know kind of what you're getting into, we do try to ask folks to kind of volunteer for a minimum of 8 hours a month.
Perfect. Thanks, Sam. Well, super. Well, I'm going to take it over again, really briefly go over kind of public outreach and interpretation, which, well, here we go. Yes, natural history. We did that. Interpretation might be something that's, you're thinking like, I don't know a second language. What's she talking about? So it's not necessarily interpreting languages. It's a purposeful approach to communication, facilitates meaningful, relevant, and inclusive experiences that deepen understanding, broadens perspectives, and inspires engagement with the world around us. So there's a whole team of people within California state parks who are called interpreters, and that's what they do. They're the folks who lead tours and things like that. But this is, you know, pretty much like we're bridging the gap, you know, we're building the bridge of understanding between these folks who didn't get to sit in on this cool Zoom meeting tonight and learn about all this cool stuff. So we got to take all that information we just learned from George and Amy and try to get it into the brains of other folks on the beaches. This is kind of like the golden rule of interpretation or conservation, maybe overall. You know, in the end, we will conserve only what we love. We will love only what we understand. We will understand only what we are taught. So this is, you know, a really important concept. And we're basically, we've got to speak for those who cannot speak for themselves. So these snowy plovers are out there trying to make a living, trying to make it work. Not only can they not speak, they're hard to see. Like George had mentioned, this is another classic, you know, view of a beach, sandy beach. This is Carmel River State Beach in the winter. And I don't know if you can see how many snowy plovers are there. I'm seeing a couple, but maybe you got up to 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Wait, 4, 8. 8. I can count. But they're hidden out there. A lot of people just don't even see them. So they don't even know that that there's a problem. But it's important to remember that, you know, we're not state park rangers. There's an enforcement side at state parks, and they're the ones who actually are law enforcement, and they are the folks you can call if something gets intense, gets out of hand. But, you know, we have to try to convince people to follow the rules kind of with our words, you know, and it's really a cool concept, really, because if we can proselytize well enough, if we can convince people, you know, to follow the rules, to understand the rules, they're more likely to continue to follow those rules, because we don't have law enforcement there 24/7. We can't all be there 24/7. So if we can, you know, change people's understanding of, you know, the habitat and the species and, you know, the space that they're recreating in, you know, we'll change that long-term behavior, and they will follow the rules, because they'll know why those rules exist. And it's also kind of tricky, because a lot of us clearly, you know, have an interest in birds and snowy plovers and going out to the beach to look at birds. But a lot of folks we interact with on the beaches, they come from a totally different background than we do. Some of them might have, you know, they don't even notice birds. I've met people like that who just don't even see them. They might be stressed out from work. Some people might have paid a lot of money to travel to Monterey, beautiful Monterey Bay, with their dog, and they're coming out here. So just trying to, you know, remember that when you interact with folks, you know, there's that golden rule of interpretation, but you can also remember the golden rule, you know, treat others as you would want to be treated. If you're in a situation where you didn't understand or know things, you know, you'd want to be treated with kindness if you can. Also, it's good to try to avoid jargon and stuff. You know, we talk about natural resources and ecosystems, and you know, kind of know your audience, kind of, you know, make some little assumptions maybe about folks when you're walking up to them to start talking. And Amy said this part too, you know, that most people, you know, they honestly don't know. Researchers estimate that on average, only 2 to 4% of depreciative behavior is malicious. So all the other times people are doing the wrong thing, they just don't know. So that's really good to keep in mind, because sometimes on these long days, and you can get frustrated, and why didn't they see the sign? You know, it's not that they don't care necessarily. Maybe they just don't know. And that's kind of a good approach to have anyway. So you just don't burn yourself out, you know, and get kind of frustrated and stuff with people. And maybe remember when you first started bird watching, you know, how hard it was to see things. And there's just a lot, you know, you don't know when you're starting out. So, you know, that just might be the situation. But it is always good to try to start a conversation with something really more friendly, you know, maybe try not to run over yelling and screaming, unless it's obviously like a life or death situation. But starting an interaction with a warm greeting, you know, hello, my name is Amanda. How are you doing today? You know, what a great day to be at the beach. This is so great. You know, I noticed you were looking at the Snowy Plover sign. You know, can I answer any questions about them? I have all these cool pictures or stickers to hand out, and just try to spark a conversation that way. Another, you know, I've got a whole series of them here for you, that opening lines, you know, what a gorgeous day. That always works. The weather, nice and nondescript. This is a good one for drones. You see people operating drones, which they're not allowed to at the parks. It's you know, oh, drones are really cool. Did you ever see that footage of the hawk attacking one? Because a lot of birds, they see it as a predator, you know, and starting the conversation that way. My dog loves to go to Carmel Beach, but I leave him at home when I come here because they're not allowed at this beach, you know. I love that breed of dog. I love boxers. That's not true, but I'll say it to make friends with someone. I saw a gull take off with an entire bag of potato chips the other day. You know, you really got to watch your food. You can't be feeding these guys. They actually eat snowy plover chicks. State parks has to try to keep everyone happy. The people, fishermen, the birds, us out here trying to recreate. It's hard work. It's so hard to spot these little birds. I'm glad I don't have to count them. We've got these amazing scientists that we have to pay to do that work because they're endangered. You know, starting the conversations that way. There might be an element of, you know, kind of playing it down, playing dumb, but you're just trying to get a foot in the door, trying to strike up a positive conversation with someone. And that's important because, you know, you kind of have to watch your tone. If you're just some random stranger walking up to people who are trying to have a fun day at the beach, how you approach them and how you start these conversations is really important. I've been on the receiving end of really like aggressive, loud, preachy people. And, you know, it doesn't make you want to engage. It makes you want to just like, like, I don't want to follow your rules. I don't even know you. So, you know, it's really important to try to, you know, it's kind of a practice in mindfulness, maybe some Zen meditation kind of stuff going on, taking deep breaths. Yeah, it can be tough work for sure. But like I said, you know, our role is just to educate. We're not law enforcement. So we're trying to help people understand. So if you see someone, you know, breaking a rule, you can inform them of the rule, but no need to get threatening or anything like that. You don't want to be escalating the situation. And if someone pushes back, sometimes people are just in a real bad mood and they don't want to hear it. If someone pushes back, you just step back. You know, you don't need to engage. Certainly don't take it personally. And your safety is number one. That's the paramount thing going out into the field. You know, who's number one? I'm number one. That's what you always got to remember. You got to preserve your physical health, your mental health when you go out there. It's really critical because if we get all burned out, you know, a lot of us maybe volunteer in other activities, the aquarium, Point Lobos, oyster catcher monitoring. You know, it can just, there's a lot of great stuff we want to do, but you have to make sure you take care of yourself so we can continue to take care of these birds and these places that we love. So I think that's pretty important. And you can always, you know, it does take practice, you know, figuring out how to start talking to people and stuff. So you can always get in touch with me if you have any specific questions or ideas, or if you just need to chat about your day. You know, I thought this was going to go great and it just blew up in my face. Sometimes you just need to talk it out with someone who's also gone through that and understands. So, you know, we'll have everybody's contact information to give out. So feel free to get in touch with us. Me about interpretation stuff, Amy about plover stuff on the beaches, the fencing, the signage, stuff like that. But, you know, when you're out there, you know, just kind of, it sounds really cheesy, but, you know, our work comes from a place of love. I get to do the fluffy, cheesy stuff here in this talk, but really try to emulate that in your public interactions. And I think it can really reach people and resonate with them. And a lot of folks are kind of frustrated and tired. Maybe they're at the beach just trying to, you know, mellow out and, you know, de-stress after living in this hectic, you know, frustrating world. All of the birds are going away. I'm so frustrated. You know, being out in nature helps us feel connected. So really trying to share that with another person. And even though they might not latch onto it, you know, instantly, I don't often, you know, just have poetry coming out of my mouth when I approach someone on the beach and I'm trying to tell them their dog needs to be on a leash, but just trying to be passionate, be caring, and you know, and just honestly try to share this feeling, this love of birds that we have with other people, and you know, really hoping that makes a difference, and I think it does. But yes, you know, with that, I think I'll turn it over to Sam to get more into the logistics of things. Here's my information on the screen. Again, we'll send out all this information in a follow-up email. And yeah, like I said, a lot of us maybe volunteer in other capacities and stuff. I'm with the Monterey Audubon Society. We do oyster catcher monitoring. So it's like on a rocky beach, but the same problems. And yeah, you can get kind of burned out in the summer months trying to talk to people about drones is a big problem for the oyster catchers. Dogs is the big one for snowy plovers. So really finding a good way to talk about dogs with people is important. And you know, starting out with, you're clearly an animal lover. You love dogs. I love dogs too, but I also love birds, you know, trying to put it together like that. It's takes a bit of practice, but it can be fun. Sometimes you make really strong connections. Anyways, I'll go ahead and end there and stop sharing my screen here so I can turn it over to Sam. So wonderful. I think I'll check the chat real quick. John's saying a lot of folks, dog folks, don't want to engage in conversation. It's true, but yeah, he's saying, from my experience, it's good to just point out the issue, explain the rules, and that's totally appropriate as well. You might not need to get into a giant philosophical debate or explain the entire tenets of ecology with someone. Sometimes you're just like, the sign over there, you just walk past it, it says no dogs, you know, and that might be that might be the best approach. All right, so I'll go ahead and mute myself and turn it over to Sam to go over some logistics.
Yeah, thank you, Amanda. Wonderful, wonderful tips in there, and lots of great information. Definitely, everybody, if you're interested, go back and read through those slides, because lots of really good conversational nuggets that I've used multiple times out on the beaches. So let me go ahead and share my screen. And while I'm getting that set up, just a reminder, if you haven't put your email address in the chat, please do. We can't send you any information about anything that we've got going on, any of this content from tonight, unless you send us your email address. So please drop that in the chat if you get a chance. If you have any questions about how to do that, stick around to the end. We can help you get that sorted out. Let me make sure I got this on here. All right. Are you looking at my slides?
Yep, looks good, Sam.
Awesome. Great. All right. So we heard lots of really fun, exciting things today, and I have a different form of fun and exciting thing. I get to talk about the paperwork and the logistics of sort of what the next steps look like. So again, my name is Sam Winter. I'm the Natural Resources Volunteer Coordinator in the Monterey District. That's my contact information in there. Give me a call, leave me a message, send me an email. But yeah, let's go ahead and get started. Thank you all for being here. Oops, my space bar isn't working, Amy. How's that happening? All right. Okay, so our Snowy Plover Guardian program kind of runs on a schedule that sort of mirrors the behavior of the snowy plover. So our program is really split into kind of two periods. So we've got our plover breeding season, March through September, as Amy talked about. And then we've also got the overwintering season, October through February. And kind of what we're doing and during those times is pretty similar, but we're looking at different beaches. We kind of have different messaging that we're using at those different times. And so what we're doing now, and we're in March, the beginning of the plover breeding season. Right now, we've got some of our experienced plover guardians out on the beaches already from last year. And our goal is to kind of help you get trained and get all your paperwork in by kind of the end of March so that you can get out on the beaches and jump in for the rest of the breeding season. So there are a couple of kind of steps along the way. So tonight was the first thing. We had our virtual kickoff. So good job, everybody, for being here. Again, drop your email in the chat so we know you were here. The next part of the month in March here is really going to be kind of about trying to get some of that paperwork in and some of the trainings taken care of. So we have three important dates on this slide. Sort of the next big piece of training is going to be our beach training. We have two different dates. We're going to have one on Sunday, March 19th, and another one during the week, Friday, March 24th. And I'll have some more details about that later. I just want to give you a sense of the timeline for now. And I also want you to know that the final deadline for all of our volunteer paperwork is going to be March 27th. And we're doing that because we want to get folks out on the beaches kind of as soon as we can with all of that. We also have a new thing that we're going to try out this year. We're calling it some plover expert shadowing. So instead of kind of training you and sending you off on the beaches, we're going to send you off on the beach, at least to start off with a buddy. So some of our experienced plover guardians, or maybe some of our park staff too. So just get you a chance to get out on the beach and feel more confident in kind of what you're doing. So we'll talk about all of this, but again, just trying to give you the timeline here. Something exciting I'm kind of looking forward to this year. We talked about doing a mid-season birding trip with Monterey Audubon. So that's exciting. We don't have any dates yet, but that's something kind of fun to look forward to, probably towards more the middle of the season sometime. And then finally, we've got here kind of an end of season wrap-up event. So we'll get all back together, look at all the data. So all of the numbers that you're collecting, the contacts, we'll see how all that plays out, what kind of a difference we made. We'll hopefully have some preliminary numbers of how the nesting and the chicks did this year. So we'll all get together and kind of look at that in September. And then finally, in October, we'll kind of transition into our winter season. And that's a great time if you want to stick around and continue with the program. We can do some additional kind of trainings, talk about what the messaging is like in the overwintering season, and talk about switching up some of our beaches that we're looking at. So that's kind of just an overall picture of what the kind of the next steps looks like here. So we're going to get into this though. There are sort of 8 steps here that we're going to go through. I'm going to go through them kind of quickly. But again, all of this information will be available to you after this program. So we'll have it all, we'll send all of this out so you can read through it on your own time. Okay, so number 1, we've got our virtual kickoff meeting. That's tonight. So good job. Again, one last plug. Sign into the comments with your name and email address so we can send you all this information. The next thing, too, kind of the next step that's kind of along with this, at the end of this talk, there'll be a link that you can take, and I'll put it in the chat too. And we really highly are asking if you can take our pre-season survey right after this talk. It would be the best time to do it. So you can take that survey. We'll collect a little bit of information from you, kind of what is your sort of general interests, when are you thinking, what beaches are most of interest to you, some of that information. So try and take that at the end. So I'll have a link for you again that you can do. If you are watching this as a recording, I know there were some folks that couldn't make it, go ahead and send me an email after you finished this video. So just so we know you got through the video and had a chance to go through everything. All right, step number 2 is to fill out a volunteer application on a website called My Impact. So My Impact is an online system that we use primarily for logging volunteer hours, but also for signing up for volunteer shifts out on the beach. So other folks can kind of see, oh, there's somebody that's already planning to be there. You can either sign up to join them, or maybe you can, say, oh, I don't want to go there. There's already enough folks kind of planning to be there on that day. So there's that. And then it's also the place where you'll submit your observations and data of some of the contacts and stuff that you're finding. I'll send you all the information about how to use that website, My Impact, once we're sort of done and created your account, filled out that profile. But there's the website there if anybody's quick, if they want to take their photo and use that right now. But I'll send all that information out again after this video. It's a pretty easy, kind of straightforward application. It is it's an application. It's a kind of a standard state parks form that we use. So it'll, your name and info and kind of why you're interested in being a part of this program. So go ahead and fill that out. You'll have to kind of create a username and password to use the website. And there are these required fields, which is really all you need to fill in. There are a lot of fields, because it is a generic form, there are a lot of questions that aren't necessarily relevant to this program. For example, people who are being campground hosts also use the same form. So there's some questions that are more geared towards them. You don't have to fill those out, just fill out the ones that are marked as required. Step number 3 is filling out the long-term volunteer paperwork packet. So this is kind of the meat of everything here. So to participate in the Snowy Plover Guardian program, you need to register as what we call a long-term volunteer with California State Parks. So LTVs, that's kind of the abbreviation we use. These are volunteers who, basically anybody who volunteers more than 3 times per year is supposed to sign up as a long-term volunteer. So there's this paperwork packet. and then also a background check that you'll have to go through called a live scan. There may be some additional online trainings that kind of come up. But it's nice because basically means that you're able to work independently kind of with our team. You'll also log your own hours through Better Impact or My Impact. And most excitingly, you are become eligible to earn after 50 hours, if you volunteer for 50 hours within a year, a Monterey District Day Use Pass, which will get you into any of our local state parks for free. So that's Point Lobos and Big Sur, all of those wonderful fun places. And if you volunteer for 200 hours within a year, you actually get a statewide annual pass. So you can go to any of our parks for free, which is kind of exciting. The other kind of important thing too, by going through this process, I don't have it on the slide, but you do get access to workers' compensation. So if something happens to you out in the field, you will be covered. So that's good kind of to know. All right, what's in this long-term volunteer packet? It's a little lengthy, so we're just going to kind of go over this really quickly. But there's sort of two pieces in here. Number one is a packet that goes through DocuSign. So basically, you will get an email, and you'll be able to virtually fill out these forms very, very quickly. So anybody who did this program last year, it was before we had access to DocuSign. You actually had to fill out all these papers, and mail them to me, and it was a little bit more difficult. So luckily, most of the forms now are being done through DocuSign. The other piece of it is a paper packet that there are some forms we're not allowed to use DocuSign for. So you'll get some of those kind of in person, and I'll email all of these to you as we kind of get going through the process. And then again, one more plug for our pre-program survey in there. What is a live scan background check? So how does that work? So you will basically get a unique live scan request form, which will be included in your long-term volunteer paperwork packet. You'll take that form, you'll fill it out, you'll take it to somewhere that performs live scan fingerprinting. It usually costs, about $30. But if you save your receipt and complete an additional form, we can get that reimbursed for you. So it shouldn't be too bad. There's a website at the California Department of Justice, which I'll link at the very end of this presentation. They have lists and lists and lists of places that you can go to make a reservation and go and get this done. So you can kind of shop around what's closest to you, how affordable is it, what's the cost. Usually it's about $30, but it kind of depends on where you go. So you'll want to make that appointment, and then you'll take your form there, and they will kind of complete that for you. Step number 5, through My Impact, we have an online training called Bear in Mind. It's a social awareness training created by the California State Parks Human Rights Office. And as of last year, all of our long-term volunteers are required to take this training every 2 years. So you can do it through Better Impact. It's pretty quick. I don't think it takes more than 20 minutes, but we'll talk about how to do that. But that is one of the steps that you'll have to try and get done before the 27th. So then kind of our next step in this process is field training. So this will give you a chance to receive some equipment. We have some name tags and some supplies for you, stuff to hand out to people. You'll get a chance to practice approaching the public. We'll practice making some observations, taking notes, and of course, asking all kinds of questions. So we'll be out there on the beach at Monterey State Beach, and we'll have some of our staff and folks from Audubon Society and all kinds of people out there to kind of help you and do a little bit of training. So we've got 2 sessions this year, one on Sunday, March 19th. Both of these are going to be at Monterey State Beach at 9:30. And then the other one is on Friday, March 24th. I'll have all of the most important information is all going to be on one slide at the end. So don't feel like you need to jot anything down like too hurriedly. Next thing kind of new for this year, some plover expert shadowing. So basically what we're going to have you do is sign up to visit a site with one of our plover experts. So this is either a previous volunteer, this is somebody from our staff or from Audubon, maybe Point Blue, but we'll have you out there kind of getting a chance to see some birds in the wild, start the season with a little bit more confidence, practice speaking with the public, great time to kind of ask questions. And we'll try and kind of make sure that everybody gets a chance to go out with one of our plover experts kind of between, late March, early April. So really kind of helping you get started on the right foot with one of these site visits. All right. After, I think that's it. So this is sort of a nice summary page here if anybody has any questions, but crossing off the virtual kickoff meeting, you have officially attended. Good job, everybody. Here in the middle, I don't know if you can see my mouse or not, but we have a link to the Better Impact application. We have our dates for the beach trainings, and we have our deadline for paperwork in our online trainings on March 27th there. So finally, here is a link to our pre-season survey. I will also put it in the chat. I will be emailing it out to everybody who signed in as well. If you want to take out your phone right now, you can even scan this QR code and it'll take you straight to the survey. And of course, you can always email me too if you have any questions about any of this. If you need any links, any of that stuff, I can send it all to you. And we'll send out a lot of this too, kind of in a follow-up email, if you give us your email address to send it to you. So
yep, that's a crucial part, I think, is
yes.
the email in the chat room. We've got a couple more people have been added in there, Sam, while you've been chatting. So good
great.
work. Good work.
I think, yeah. Any other questions on any of that? Oops.
Yeah, we've got a question from Gail in the chat. She's saying, where is the parking at each location when you're actually volunteering? How early or late do the shifts need to start or end?
Yeah, so that's a great question. So there, I think, is parking. Amy, maybe you can jump in here. I think there's parking at every location, and we can send out to you kind of where the different actually access points are. But for now, it's kind of thinking about which, I don't know if you're taking the survey right now. In the survey, they'll kind of ask you generally kind of, maybe which beaches you might be interested in. But there is parking, I think, at each location when you're volunteering. Oh.
Yeah, we do have parking everywhere.
Yeah, and we'll help you kind of figure out which site you might want to go to.
Yeah, and for the time of the shifts, how early or late, I think, again, we're kind of trying to be flexible for people so that it can work with their schedule, either you and a buddy, or, you already do a beach walk all the time. You like this certain stretch of beach and you already are out there. Yeah, so I think whatever works best for you. Of course, it's probably not recommended to go like at night. The beaches, I'm not sure if they're entirely closed at the state parks, but just for safety purposes, probably shouldn't be there in the dark. That's
yeah, the parking areas would be closed at night. The beaches themselves are not closed, but what we want you guys to try to maximize public contacts. And so you want to try to be there when people are going to be there. So great times to be there are when the weather is good, because when the weather's good, people want to be on the beach. And so sometimes, early morning shifts are sometimes there's not as many people, but a lot of times you catch dog walkers in the early morning. So it's not a bad time. But I'd say to maximize people, I feel like midday to early afternoon is probably, and into the afternoon, not just early afternoon. Midday to into the afternoon is probably a best time to maximize human contacts. But people can be found, all times of the day. So if there's a better time that fits into your schedule, we would be open to that.
And one thing that we talked about too, maybe trying to do a little bit of this year is sort of sending out some email alerts saying, hey, we've got a big holiday weekend coming up. We would really love to see if we can get some coverage of certain beaches, or even, kind of the goal of maybe we can have, people really covering a certain beach all day long, having, people on shifts. So coordinating a little bit on some of those more popular busy weekends.
Hey, Sam, we had a question in the chat from John Hubbard. He was asking about that. Well, he was saying he completed most of this last year. Does he have to do it again this year?
Yeah, no, John, you are already signed up as a long-term volunteer. So you are good to go. I think the only thing we would love it still if you could take the pre-season survey. And even folks that you're sort of on the fence, if you're like, I don't know if I want to do this or not, go ahead and just take the survey, and that'll help us kind of assess, where we're at with folks and interests and everything. So even if you're not sure yet, after all these wonderful presentations, go ahead and take that survey. And if you have already volunteered with us, you should be good. We all just go through your paperwork and make sure there haven't been any changes. Yeah. Does that answer your question, John?
I think it did. Yep, very good.
I think it did. I'm sorry. I got interrupted here and I had to leave for a moment. But I think you said it. We should be good if we went through all this live scan and other stuff a year ago.
Yeah, that'll all still be good.
Yeah. I don't see why it would change. Okay.
Yeah, but do
The
take
only
the
thing we
survey.
might want to be involved in is this expert shadowing.
Well, we can talk only if you're up for it. Only if you're up for it.
I was trying to put a comment about approaching the public, and I've actually had people offended. The chatty stuff they don't want to hear. They're out there to go for a walk with their dog on the beach, and I have to, I'm in the sorry position of informing them that, look, go over this way with your dog. Luckily, where I've been serving, there was an alternative. And, they have little interest in birds or, sadly. The additional comment, I'm just going to say this here, is our signage has become faded, in some cases obscured to the point where it's difficult for them to see it. They don't notice the signs. And they've been going out there walking their dogs all winter. I've seen them out in those very beaches during the winter with their dogs. So now they're used to, doing this. So that might be something to think about, putting in some volunteer hours on just, maybe repainting the signs or something. I don't know. But that seems like a necessity there. I'm sure I've raged away at you before about that part. Apologies for that, but thanks for clarifying my question anyhow.
Yeah, thanks, John.
Okay.
Hey, John, I feel like you have a good point about some people don't want to hear a long message. And I think that's very true. And I make many dog contacts on the beach. And often I am just really brief. And I make it just, basically I'm informing them that the rules here are that there are no dogs allowed. And then I do try to tell them why. I usually ask them, I meet them on the beach somewhere. So I usually ask them where they entered the beach, and I let them know that, there are actually signs there. And I tell them, I suggest where they can go to. I ask them to return the way they came, and to, I often give them information about where they can take their dog instead. And we do have some brochures.
Yeah, thank you, Amanda. That my experience has been almost identical. I was actually standing right under a sign that said no dogs, and they didn't see the sign. They're blind to the signs. That's why I was kind of, maybe freshen up the signs a little bit would help. And the problem is that beach, I was the only one covering it. So there was, I was out there for maybe 3 hours of the week or something. And, what's going on the rest of the week? A lot of dog footprints on the beach, I can tell you that. I know it's a problem we don't want to hear about right now, but it's reality. Do what we can with it.
Yeah, thank you, John.
Yeah, the only thing I can think of is to get out there and sort of sprinkle the time out. Of course, that requires more trips, but it might be doable. If we can identify peak times, maybe the researchers can do that or something. I don't know. Yeah, a little discouraged, but still not ready to give up. Yeah.
Well, I'm glad you're back.
Thank you, Sam. Yeah, I know. Thank you both. Thank you all for that.
Yeah, thanks, John. That's really good. That's really good feedback. And it is it is really challenging, and it's, you know, the public outreach is just one component of kind of trying to we have all these rules, we have all these laws. It's the same with like speeding cars, right? There's the enforcement branch, there's kind of the education outreach, signage. I'm going to be at a marine protected area compliance forum soon, and they had somebody doing their master's degree all on signage. Where do I place it? How should, you know, what information should be on it? It's a big complicated issue, and a lot of folks might say, oh, there's too many signs, there's not enough signs. It's kind of an endless discussion amongst us, you know,
Deeper
folks.
than we realized. Yeah.
Exactly. So yeah, it's definitely like a multi-pronged approach. And but yeah, thank you so much for coming back this year, despite
Well-
the frustrations with dogs on the beaches. That's the biggest problem, I think. Yep.
Yeah, we love the beach and we love the plovers.
Yep. Well, so good to have you. Yeah. Does anybody else have any other questions, either for Sam, or we do still have Amy on board here, and George? So if you've got any, you know, little last minute natural history questions you want to know about, certainly let's see, feel
I
free
think
to
Yvonne is Yvonne still on?
Yvonne's here too. Yes, I see Yvonne there. If you have any questions on what kind of camera does she use to get those awesome pictures, that's what I was thinking. Things like that.
I did have a question for George, if I can. If he's still here, I think he is.
Yeah, George is still in the meeting. Let's see. Yep, he's unmuted. Let's hear it.
Yeah, or should I type it into the chat, maybe? I don't know. It just pertained to the number that make it from fledging to actual breeding in the subsequent year. You know, we're losing a lot of birds. We'd obviously, you know, unsuccessful nesting, only a certain number fledge. I forgot what it was. It was in the 40%, I think. But then what makes it from there to breeding adulthood? I don't know if maybe I missed that number.
Yeah, that's the really across any species you study, that's the hardest number to get.
Yeah.
So that's the number that has the most kind of variation, simply because it's a little bit hard to tease out if the bird went somewhere else where you weren't looking. So it may in fact be alive. But yeah, from the estimates we know, it kind of varies year to year. The average is probably in the upper 40s from fledging to breeding the next year. But we've seen, you know, between 28% or so into the upper 50s of a percent chance, just kind of depending on the year. So a lot of variation.
Yeah. Yeah. All right. Yeah. Yeah. What I would have guessed from other survey work I've been involved in, I guess I would say. Yeah.
Yeah.
Interesting. Yeah.
I was actually going to ask George a question as well. That frame of time when the plover population was going back below that dotted line, I feel like that was maybe like 2015 or 16. And I've just recently kind of had an epiphany about this tight link between our shorebirds and offshore kelp and algae, because all that beach rack that comes to shore is what, you know, hosts all the bugs that feed all the shorebirds. Not all of them, but a good number of them, certainly the plovers. And so we had this marine heat wave in that 2015, 2016 time period. Do you think that affected the offshore kelp and algae? And then there wasn't enough beach rack, and then that's kind of led to a lower population of their snowy plovers?
Yeah, I don't know the answer to that, but that's actually something that we sort of talked about internally, trying to figure out sort of some kind of link between the amount of kelp and rack on the beach. So even within a season, you know, like what's washed up on some big high tide, and do we see like a direct sort of you know, increase in fledging success or something in the weeks following that. So yeah, I don't know, but I would suspect that there is some link going on there that certainly could explain part of that population number overall. Because even for the adults, they're not going to be a successful breeding if they themselves aren't doing as well.
Yeah. That was just the thought I had. So thanks for that.
Yeah, no, it's a great point.
Hi, this is Gail Hoffman. I also have a more detailed question, if that's okay.
Yeah, go for it, Gail.
So last year, the first half of the year, I was in San Diego, and initially I was volunteering with the San Diego Audubon chapter for California least terns, and we were removing invasive plants from the nesting sites. But the second thing I did was with the actually for the Navy on Coronado with monitoring. So the main thing was least terns. But and here's the connection with the snowy plovers. What I did see that they were doing is, I hate to call it a cage, but it was like a sort of a small metal cage that they were putting over the snowy plover's nest to give them additional protection. And I just wondered if that's a possibility here, if you had ever considered that. So that was my question.
Yeah, so those, I guess, Amy, I don't know if you wanted, I saw you come off mute.
Yeah, you can answer too, George. I was just going to say, so those are called exclosures. There's mini exclosures, which are the small ones, might be what you saw, Gail. I'm not sure. We used to do large exclosures. So we have a history on the Monterey Bay where we did use exclosures to protect nests from predators. And we found that there was exposure use was linked to a mortality of adults. So adults were being taken, great horned owls were actually taking adults from exclosed nests at a higher rate than we liked. And so we really limit the use of exclosures now in the Monterey Bay. They are very rarely used, but they are used in the range still in other places in California. And I'm not sure about Oregon and Washington. Actually, I forgot what everybody said at the range-wide meeting, but they definitely are still used, but not so much by us.
Yep. And it's also depends on how often you're monitoring, because even like windy days can cause sand to move, and if the birds are trapped inside a cage, it doesn't always work out well. So there's some challenges to using them, like Amy pointed out.
Yeah, great question, Gail. And yeah, a lot of different organizations are working on protecting the snowy plovers on the West Coast. Ventura Audubon, they actually own parcels of like beachfront like land, and so a big portion of their staffing is actually like doing Amy's job or a state parks job, like putting up the fencing and doing dune restoration work. So, and then the Navy and the Army have a bunch of beachfront properties. There's lots of different groups working on snowy plovers on the West Coast. Now on the East Coast, they have the piping plover, and there's a really good group called the NYC Plover Project, I think it's called. They have a really good like social media campaign all about piping plovers on, again, really busy New York beaches in the summer months. Same kind of problems, the shorebirds are facing it all over the place. Steele was asking about, he's surprised Asilomar is not one of the beaches with monitors. Well, Asilomar, I think, is so full of people and dogs. I rarely see snowy plovers there at all, a little bit in the winter, along with semi-palmated plovers. But I don't know when they might have ever nested there. That would have been long ago, probably. Yeah, so no nesting or really serious roosting, I don't think, at Asilomar. It's already far too impacted by people and dogs, unfortunately. That place is, that's my opinion. I don't know if anybody else has an idea on that one, but I love Asilomar, but there's a lot of dogs and people there. All right, any other final questions? It's about 8:30, so it's getting late. Any other final questions before we sign off, everybody? Oh, real quick, I forgot. I was going to share my screen real quick because I needed to do a shout out to John Muir Laws. He's an amazing artist in the Bay Area. He donated his talent, his time to create our Snowy Plover Guardian program with this adorable dad, presumably, and his little chick with his little bands that look like leg warmers, I think. Super cute. So I'm going to get a bunch of stickers made of this year to give to you guys to hand out to folks at the beaches, or you can just totally wallpaper your water bottle or spotting scope or whatever you want. But really great logo there by John Muir Laws. So look him up. He's great. And yeah, we'll be in touch. Sam and I and Amy will reconvene, and we're going to send out a big email to you with all this information and all the information to sign up and get through all the paperwork and logistics, so you can yeah, get out on the beaches and help those plovers. So yeah, without any other questions or anything, I see thank yous. Thank you everyone. Thank you so much, Yvonne, for sharing. Thank you, George, for sticking around and answering some final questions, and for your work. Thank you, Amy and Sam. So good.
And thank you, Amanda.
Thank you, Amanda.
Yeah, no
Yeah,
problem.
thanks, Amanda. Thanks for
Thank you all.
the invite.
But yeah, good night, and we'll talk to you again soon, I guess. I'll stay on if anybody has any final questions, but feel free to head out. Oh, I'll stop the recording too.